Hey, Walking Dead fans, welcome back to Chronocord Media and our weekly Walking Dead episode review. This is for episode 6 of season 6, entitled Always Accountable. As always, I am C-Dub, joined alongside my co-host JC. Here it is, your spoiler warning. If you haven't watched episode 6 yet, go back, watch it, pause this video, and come right back. Also, if you have not already, please subscribe here on YouTube. We bring you our weekly Walking Dead coverage and plenty of other great content. JC, this week's episode focused on Sasha, Abraham, as well as Daryl, the three that were leading the pack away from Alexandria when all hell broke loose.
Yeah, it's good to see them again, C-Dub. It feels like a long time since we've had a focus on those three characters. As you said, they were leading one half of the herd away from Alexandria. So at the beginning of this episode, they finally complete their mission. They have guided part of that herd away for good, 20 miles away from Alexandria. But all of a sudden, Daryl, Sasha, and Abraham are getting shot at, C-Dub. What's up with that?
Survival of the fittest, my friend. That is the rules of the game in The Walking Dead. Yeah, Daryl, as well as Sasha and Abraham, they end up being tailed first after being shot at in other vehicles by a group of people who we don't really find out who they are. But I gotta say, man, those guys are terrible shots. They were trying to hit Daryl on that motorcycle and could not hit him for the life of them.
Yeah, that was kind of comical. How could they miss Daryl? I mean, it was an easy shot, it seemed. So Abraham and Sasha had to ditch their car, and Daryl had to make his way into the woods. So essentially they were separated early on in this episode. Daryl makes his way into some wooded area that looks like it was completely burned out. And we're not sure how exactly that happened.
Yeah, JC, right after Daryl puts out a radio call to Sasha and Abraham and realizes that there's no reception, he wisely decides to ditch his motorcycle in the bushes, and he comes across what was really jarring, a very small, completely burned up zombie wearing a melted motorcycle helmet. That was pretty intense there. I think Daryl thought the same. He also noticed that from his ditching his bike when being shot at, he did get back on it, but he ended up scraping himself up pretty bad, had some nasty road rash going, takes his jacket off, and kind of leaves everything behind there. And as he's pretty much deciding what to do, he comes across two females in the woods who tell him, "We got what we have fair and square." And then before Daryl knows it, bam, he gets whacked across the head and knocked out. We see Daryl trying to regain consciousness as night has fallen near a campfire with these three people. And it's not until the next day, apparently, that he fully regains consciousness. And these three people have essentially held him captive and directed him that they are going to continue moving. Daryl's pretty much at the mercy of these people at this point, JC.
It was pretty obvious that these people thought Daryl was someone else, part of a group perhaps that they encountered or were a part of before. So they think he's a bad guy. They've got him tied up. They're kind of accusing him of being one of them and should have never trusted you. And obviously Daryl doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. But my question was, who are they? Is this another possible human survival group that are taking advantage of or brutalizing other survivors? We do not know yet. But C-Dub, then the girl faints. I think her name was Tina. And Daryl steals their bag during the commotion and gets back into the woods. And he discovers in the bag a cooler that says insulin must keep cool, which would explain the girl fainting. So now we're brought over to Abe and Sasha. They've made their way into a deserted town, and they both decide that it's best to stay there and let Daryl track them to that location instead of them trying to go find him. That would probably be impossible. C-Dub, some quality bonding time here between Sasha and Abe. They're having some pretty deep conversations about who's got their head on straight and whether they're both back from that abyss that a lot of these Walking Dead characters go through at some point in their journey.
Yeah, it seems like it's almost a competition at this point between Abraham and Sasha as to which one is more due for the nut house. We end up going back to Daryl All this commotion with Tina fainting due to her blood sugar, we have to assume, comes at a moment when the group is overlooking a compound of some sort, and they make reference to going back for Patty, which will come into play later. Daryl makes a break for it, and once he realizes that that insulin is probably why she fainted, he kinda has a change of heart and realizes that it's not right for him to deny them of that insulin. Daryl goes back and actually offers a truce, gives them the insulin, and it's at this point, JC, when their cover is blown and they are pursued by an unknown group of people who we find out are the people that this group, Tina, Honey, and the male who knocked Daryl out, apparently named just D. This must be the group that they were alluding to, that they talked about in the woods. We heard a short conversation between D and Daryl explaining the whole situation.
And I think through those conversations that the guy D started to get an idea that Daryl was not part of this group. And when Daryl comes back with the insulin, I think that notion is confirmed. Now, Daryl helps them hide in the woods. And I gotta say, C-Dub, this trick that Daryl pulls, there's a walker that's stuck like behind a rock or something, and he kind of motions in the brush, and one of the bad guys comes over and is promptly bitten by the walker that is trapped. What a great trick by Daryl there. And the bitten guy calls for one of his friends, who promptly comes over and amputates the arm. Either way, C-Dub, I don't think this guy has a high chance for survival.
No, I'm afraid not. That was really a throwback to the other amputations that we saw. We saw Michonne take off Tyrese's arm. We also saw, of course, Herschel have his leg amputated. Man, that was super, super brutal. But if that's your only chance for survival, you got to take it. We then transition over to Abraham, who has decided to take first watch rather than sleeping, as Sasha is attempting to do. Abraham goes out onto a bridge and finds a military vehicle. He had apparently spotted it beforehand and saw that there was what looked to be a former soldier still in his combat dress, impaled or hung up on a fence overhanging off of this bridge. And Abraham, at first, he looks in the back of it. There's some military cases back there. He finds a great jackpot, RPGs. Way to go, Abraham. He also finds some cigars, look to be fairly expensive. And Abraham decides, as he's looking at this zombie, this former soldier overhanging off of this fence, he sees the RPG on his back. And I thought that the whole purpose was to go get the RPG. But in the midst of all that, what was really a stupid move by Abraham, he has this total freak out moment. The zombie's like snipping back and forth, shaking its head, trying to bite him. And he just starts freaking out and then decides wisely to get the hell off of that fence before he falls off of this bridge.
Yeah, C-Dub, I think that was his awakening moment when he finally got his act together and realized, survival is the most important thing here, and not going crazy and trying to be a badass like he was in previous episodes. And I gotta say, what a find by Abraham in the back of that Humvee. I have a feeling that those RPGs will come in handy big time coming up real soon in the show. So flashback to Daryl and his new friends. They've escaped the people tracking them down. And they reveal that they are the ones that burned down the wooded area with all of those charred corpses everywhere. And they come across a destroyed building from the fire, and Tina, the diabetic girl, unfortunately recognizes two of the people that were killed in the blaze. Kind of looks like they're trapped under whatever melted substance is above them. And then all of a sudden, C-Dub, they break the plastic or glass or whatever the hell it is, and they take a big old chomp out of poor Tina.
Tina, what a terrible, terrible decision you made. I mean, I know you're diabetic and you got low blood sugar, and sometimes it makes you make bad decisions, but boy, you paid for that one. Nevertheless, Tina, of course, does deserve a proper burial, as Dee and Daryl are digging the grave for Tina. Daryl asks him the questions. how many walkers have you killed? Which, of course, D answers, I don't know, a lot. And then, how many people have you killed? To which D answers, none. And then Daryl says, why? And this was one of the big moments, I think, for the relationship between D and Daryl. Of course, Daryl being on his own in this group. Once of 3, now it's only 2. D basically answers that if he kills another human, he can't go back to the way things were before the outbreak. And it's at this point, Daryl, it seems like he trusts him, and he tells him that he and his people have a place where things are as close to as it's going to get, like they used to be.
Well, we're seeing Daryl continuing the recruitment by Alexandria for more people. It seems Daryl is kind of starting to get a trustful vibe from this new guy, D. But lo and behold, right when Daryl goes to separate from them and make his way back to Sasha and Abraham, D pulls his gun out on Daryl and takes his coveted motorcycle and crossbow. I have a feeling, C-Dub, that these two characters, D and Honey, will pay a huge price for this move later on down the road. So as they take off on the motorcycle, Daryl makes a pretty good discovery. He finds a fuel truck that was covered up in brush and bushes. He takes care of the walker inside of it, and our man Daryl has a new ride, C-Dub. He swiftly makes his way back to pick up Abraham and Sasha, who earlier in the episode, there was definitely some chemistry building up. I think Sasha and Abraham definitely have something going on. Maybe Cupid has struck in the land of the Walking Dead once again.
Apparently so, JC. Last week, we saw that big kiss between Denise and Tara. And this week, we get a bit of love here. Seems like it's a plea here from Abraham, like he's been plotting here on Sasha for a while. It could be a little bit one-sided, though. We don't really see anything. They don't really hook up. But, man, Daryl going and finding Patty, as we saw, that must have been the Patty that these people were alluding to. It said it right on the license plate. Huge fuel truck. The question remains, is this fuel truck still filled with fuel? If so, man, what a find. Either way, that provides a chariot for Daryl to, just like they thought he would, go track Sasha and Abraham and head back on their way to Alexandria.
One final note, C-Dub, I wanted to ask you about the carved figurine that Daryl took from D earlier in the episode. And then at the end, when D steals his motorcycle and crossbow, Daryl is left with only a knife and this carving. Do you think this little figurine will have some kind of symbolic meaning coming up in this season?
I have a great suspicion that, as we've seen before in The Walking Dead, sometimes there's some items that are coveted because of how much it helps you survive. And there's other items like Herschel's pocket watch and apparently like this figurine, which D said, my grandfather taught me how. Maybe this figurine is the figurine that perhaps D's grandfather made for him. As we know, sometimes those things that are of sentimental value have more value than items that can be beneficial to your survival. So I have a feeling that Daryl, of course, wants his crossbow back and probably would like the motorcycle back, and he's going to get him by hook or by crook. But I think this guy is probably going to want this little wood carving back at some point. We're going to have to see whenever these two meet up somewhere down the road. You know it's going to happen.
There definitely has been a shift downwards in energy and intensity from those first few episodes in season 6. But I'm hoping that these last 2 episodes of season 6, part 1, adds some resolution to the storylines for all of these characters, individual and as a group, that we've been following. The last scene in this episode, episode 6 of season 6, we have Sasha, Daryl, and Abraham in the fuel truck heading back to Alexandria, and they are trying to communicate with Rick on the walkie-talkie. And it sounds like at the very end of the episode, we hear through the fuzz the word help. So we will have to see what happens in episode 7, titled Heads Up, next week on The Walking Dead. Everyone, thanks for joining us here on our weekly Walking Dead recap and review. Let us know what you thought about the latest episode of The Walking Dead by commenting below this video. Make sure to subscribe to Chronocord to keep up to date with all of our Walking Dead content. Until next week, don't get bit.